Welcome on Texas football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Rod Babers. We got a little mid-afternoon update here for you. The Longhorns of Steve Sarkisian seem to have found and identified their next defensive line coach, Rod Babers. It is a guy from the Miami Dolphins that was not on any list. Steve Sarkisian dipping into his bag of tricks to find someone that really nobody knows that much about. He hasn't coached on what I would consider the major college level, but he does have the NFL ties that I think Sark, and you talked about this last night on the live stream, Sark likes to take some guys that have that NFL pedigree. His name is Kenny Baker. He was the assistant defensive line coach of the Miami Dolphins. Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator there. Rod, what do we can go in the details of what his pedigree is and all this other stuff. Yeah. But what do you think of the hire overall? Steve Sarkisian kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to find somebody I like that fits what I want to do, that I think can recruit and develop. He kind of just tells everybody else, they didn't know who Chris Jackson was either a year ago.
Very true. That's a good point. You brought that up too, right? I remember you saying multiple times, hey, man, this might be somebody that's way off the radar, guys. We listing all these big-time names, the splash hires. This guy has this resume that he may decide, hey, man, I like this guy. I don't give a damn what y'all think. And he talks about that in recruiting, right? He's like, hey, man, we don't worry about the stars. We go after the players that, fit what we want to do, the players that show us the signs, right, that they can fit into our culture. So it's really interesting. I actually, I love it because it takes swagger and confidence at Texas to make a hire like this, because Longhorn fans are they're gonna criticize it, they're gonna critique it as much as possible. And I'll tell you what I think he was. First of all, the NFL tie. I do believe that he wants coaches on his staff that have an NFL connection, whether as a player or a coach or both. I think he wants to be able to walk into living rooms, and when he's making the pitches to these players, he himself can say, hey, I know how it looks. You look like an NFL player. I know because I coached at the NFL level. I coached NFL players, and I know what it takes because I've developed NFL players. And I think I can develop you into being an NFL player, which I have seen. And I think he wants to be able to make that connection constantly. And you got a lot of those. You got a lot of those right on the staff right now who have that NFL pedigree. If you want to say that, whether it be a player or a coach, you got to show a choice. You got Chris Jackson. You just mentioned him. Now you got another one, right? In Kenny Baker. Kyle Flood's got it. Sark's got it. Shorts has got it. More and more of these guys seem to have that. I think I'm not saying it's an end all be all for Sark, but I think he likes it. I think he likes being able to throw that out there as much as possible because he knows no matter what the generation, we talked about this, Bobby, the guys from the 70s and the guys from 2025 class of recruiting for Texas, they all have that goal in common. They all want to go to the league. They all want to play in the league. Can you help me accomplish that goal? And I think Sark right now wants to be able to make as many ties to that league as possible. And here's another one in Kenny Baker.
It's interesting. Let's go down his resume of sorts, because he's not got this like blue chip label.
No,
like this blue chip resume. He's from the Atlanta area, though, which I do think is important because I know Texas wants to do more in the state of Georgia and in the South. So that's a legitimate piece. And that's where the majority of defensive linemen is in the deep South, including the state of Texas, but all the way across it. So I think that's important. So you look at that. He was at Lakeside High School in Georgia, then at Berry College as the linebackers coach in Mount Berry, Georgia. Then he went to Mercer, which is his alma mater, as the defensive line coach in 2014. Then he became the defensive line coach at UT Chattanooga in 2019. Western Kentucky for 3 years from 2020 to 2022. And then this past season with the Miami Dolphins. The interesting thing here is he's coached D-line now only D-line since 2014. So he's got a good 10 years experience.
Yep.
D-line coaching, which I think is healthy. He's in his high 30s, 37, 38, something like that.
I believe yeah, 37, somewhere around.
He's got some energy on the recruiting trail a little bit. I've watched some of his videos and his interviews and whatnot. Clearly articulate, well-spoken. I think he's going to be able to connect with players across the board. period. I think this is an interesting hire because, to your point about Sark, he just came off a national championship run. It wasn't national championship, but Final Four playoff run. He gets some latitude, right? People aren't questioning him as much. If he makes this hire the year after they go 5-7, people are questioning Steve Sarkisian. I think that's interesting to me. People are going to give him latitude nowadays. Don't you agree with that? And more importantly, don't you think he deserves some latitude to a degree in hires like this?
There's no question. And this is one of those hires where, usually Longhorn fans would pick it apart. I mean, think about it. If Kenny Baker doesn't have the NFL tie for the 1 year as the assistant D-line coach for the Miami Dolphins, I don't even know if you can legitimize the hire. You couldn't, but he's a fast riser. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. But getting back to it, I agree with you. Sark has made great hires at coaches, even like guys like Chris Jackson, who have been kind of off, they have been the most recognizable names, but great hire. And I think Sark is looking at who fits with the coaching staff, personality, disposition-wise, but also the mix of the old and the new, right? You talk about that young energy. You want some young energy, but you also want some old wisdom. And you got to have the mix of that young energy and that old wisdom on the staff. I think Sark's really, I think he's cognizant of that. But also you brought up the fact that, he has coached in the Atlanta area or around there. I believe Lakeside is, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the Decatur county.
It's a suburb school.
Yeah, somewhere around there. I mean, I've been tracking it for the last 4 years. In the last 4 draft cycles, the metro areas that are the most fertile metro areas in the country, meaning produce the most NFL draftable talent. Because I think I had somebody who's a recruiter that told me, he's like, nah, man, we don't necessarily pay attention to schools anymore. We go to areas, we go to regions, areas. I want to hit a lot of different spots in one. That's why DFW is such a valuable area, such a valuable metro area these days, because you have so many great schools, so many great athletes to choose from. As a recruiter, you can go there in terms of maximizing your time. DFW is a great place to do it. The only place better than DFW right now in terms of producing NFL draftable talent for metro areas is Atlanta. That's it. That's the only area in the country in the last 4 years producing more NFL draftable players than DFW. And this guy's got a lot of ties in Atlanta. And what's recruiting about? It's about connections. It's about relationships. It's about ties. And this guy's got deep ties to Atlanta, deep ties to Georgia. I think that matters. I do. I think it matters in recruiting. And if he's a fast riser, I'll tell you why being a fast riser matters, right? He's a guy that's, he's had 5 years total at an FBS or an NFL level. So he didn't rise in quick. He's basically got 11 total years, something like that, 12 years at coaching period. He started coaching, I believe his first coaching stint, 2009. He was a student assistant with Gardner-Webb because he was, that's where he played, right? He was a team captain, defensive. He was actually a really good player for Gardner-Webb. He was a defensive player of the year for them, 4-year letterman, ended up getting his master's too. So he's really smart. But to be a fast riser in the coaching ranks, and I've studied it because I thought about getting into coaching, it's all about networking. It's all about networking. And to be able to jump from one job to another really quickly, to spend 1 or 2 years at a job, boom, jump to another job. That's also, a job that's going to put you on the ascend, on the trajectory to being wherever you want to be, a high NFL guy or a head coach, whatever it may be. You got to make connections quickly. And you got to cultivate those relationships quickly, and you have to continue to cultivate them, right? You can't burn bridges. You got to be a guy that cultivates relationships, and you got to continue to build on them constantly. He's obviously one of those guys. I mean, he got to the NFL coaching wise, and guys, trust me, in the NFL, there's a lot of nepotism, and you got to know somebody. So you know what I mean to get to break through in the way he did, or you have to be excelling, right? You have to just be excelling to the point where everybody notices what you're doing. Brendan Marion's kind of like that. Brendan Marion's go offense was so spectacular. People were like, that's different. What the hell? That's wild. And he's putting up the big numbers. So people came, to study it. And then that's why he became a fast riser. That is not the case for Kenny Baker, right? Can't be the case for a D-line coach. He's a fast riser because he makes connections. He cultivates relationships really well, and that's great for recruiting. That's recruiting in a nutshell, pretty much, folks. And he's got ties to one of the arguably the most fertile recruiting metro area in the country for NFL talent right now, and that's deep in SEC territory, in the heart of it, Atlanta. That is the heart of SEC country. It's Atlanta, baby.
One of the things that strikes me, and one of the reasons why I think Sark also wanted it's not only the recruiting aspect that the NFL pedigree helps. It's this, the NFL in college, you can have run stopping defensive linemen and defensive linemen who get after the quarterback. I mean, kind of different things. In the NFL, you got to do both.
Yep.
I mean, and that means you have to be able to teach the pass rush as well as teach run defense. And so I do think that that's not something that is always the truth in college football. And for this position, I know it's not a big thing because everybody says, oh, well, everybody teaches pass rush. Well, in the NFL, they make it into an art form. We've had Nathan O'Neill on here before, the D-line coach that is one of the D-line coaches for the Senior Bowl and, works out guys like Byron Murphy and Charles Omenihu in the offseason, right? And he's all about pass rush. And that's one of the things he always says is the NFL coaches typically have a PhD in pass rush. Now, they all know how to teach run defense. That's taught by everybody. But the thing about the NFL coaches, he says that they know how to get after it in the run, in the passing game as well as anything. Hopefully he brings that to Texas. He's had a couple of guys that have had up one of his defensive linemen had 8.5 sacks. That now I know that's a lower level, but still that's a lot of sacks for an interior defensive lineman. All right, Kenny Baker is the new defensive line coach for the University of Texas, according to reports. Excited about this move because, again, I am one of those guys that say you never know where the next guy's going to come from. And just because you don't know him or he doesn't have a rep that precedes him in some ways or a big name that precedes him, sometimes that's the best ones you find. Everybody's got to start somewhere on the big stage. That looks like what Steve Sarkisian has kind of deigned on Kenny Baker out of the Miami Dolphins. All right, Rob, we're going to have more on this and stuff later. You've got Coach Shipley in the Football Theory tonight. For Rod Babers, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been a little update on Texas football. Welcome.